Welcome to Leagues Behind, the Arena Gauntlet League's history and league design vodcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher C. York. I'm a philosophy instructor. My specialty is the philosophy of sport and games, and I am known as the founder of the Arena Gauntlet League and a few leagues behind that one. My special guest today, who will join me to discuss Amonkhet Remastered Sealed League, is that league's winner, Mr. Evan Chu. Welcome to the vodcast, and it's been a long time coming. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. You know, always happy to chat with, long time and new members of the AGL. And we have quite a history. Not working together necessarily on much of the interior of league, though, back in the day, which we'll get to, I've given my share of suggestions and stuff like that. But I think we worked together a lot in terms of setting up the league, didn't we?
Yeah, you were our official league liaison at Three Kings Loot at the very beginning. And obviously, as we sort of touched on previously, it's better if there's some, let's say, bait on the line or money in the pot to encourage players to take their game seriously, to play their matches out. And so, with the era of COVID-inspired sponsorship drawing to an end, we were looking for a store to partner with and start, charging entry fees so that we could have a prize pot to keep people invested in playing. So before, I think at this point still, the entry fee for the tournament was still $0, and sponsors were still offering prizes so that we would be able to play. I think that at this point, Face to Face was still putting $100 in the kitty for each tournament, and again, Three Kings Loot that you were associated with at the time was still throwing in promo packs to incentivize people to play.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. All throughout the pandemic, Wizards of the Coast was aware that, the kind of these lifeblood, the communities that held their game together, they were kind of at risk. Purchase however they could. And so they were still sending out these promo packs, and they were still giving them to stores so that they could host online events. Maybe people would get their F&M together, either doing standard in some stores or sealed, not sealed really, but actually, yeah, sealed in some cases as well, or draft, but just on Arena. So they would use, I think it wasn't even Draftmancer at the time. Do you remember what it was, Chris?
We were using draftsim.com, I think, to generate packs. According to the rule set, which I've printed out here, we were using DraftSim to generate seal pools, which is not exactly state of the art, but we did what we could.
No, definitely not. Shout out to Dave, was it, right? Who currently maintains Sealed Deck Tech, which we use a lot in conjunction with Francesco's Booster Tutor.
Yes, both those guys really gave us so much in terms of running leagues efficiently. The unsung heroes of League, really. They took us from the Stone Age into the sort of era of modern convenience that we now enjoy.
Yeah, even now I'm thinking of how Adam's rolling the pools. Or it's Adam or somebody else on the LC who's, Wednesday before the league starts, they'll roll it on Wednesday. But then back in the day, I think it was an even more involved process that you had to bother yourself with, right? Wasn't that right, Chris?
Yeah, I think that we had to sort of make, if I recall, and I don't recall very well, I think at one point we had to type out, maybe it was just the first couple leagues, we had to actually type out the cards that appeared on the screen and back it up with a screenshot. Yeah. At this point, I'm not sure my memory holds up to what the exact, it says here, screen captures and export files of their pools will be emailed to players. So I guess that maybe DraftSim had some sort of export function at this point. But since we were generating all the pools, we were also mailing out all of the export files to players
Right.
individually, which is not
Yeah.
optimally efficient, but nevertheless, it seemed to work to keep tournament integrity functioning. So maybe one of the first things we should talk about with Amonkhet Remastered is just a little bit of a history of the league. So up to this point, this is the largest league that we had had. So with Ikoria, right, we had 30 players, and there was a 28%. Therefore, there was a 27% chance to top eight, or a 3.3% chance of any one player to win the league. With M21, there was a 38% chance of any player to top eight, and a 4.7 chance of any player to win. With 48 players in Amonkhet Remastered, this was our most challenging league to top eight to date. So it was 17% odds for any random player to top eight, but it was only a 2.1% chance of anyone winning, which again happened to be you after a 6-week fight.
Yep.
So
Got lucky with my pool. What can I say?
So comparatively, right, the biggest achievement thus far historically. So that's important to note. I think, let me see, at this time, right, one thing I do want to note is I think that you had volunteered to be on the LC at one time. And I want to talk about this whole thing because there's a sort of, if you watch the vodcast I did with Amir, we have this sort of like trauma from Dubai where the owner of the Battlezone store took over the league and killed it within 2 leagues, right? So there's this idea that I sort of carried over that, if a store controls the event, basically it's the death of league. And so I think that at the time, you're interested to be in the LC, which was, of course, commendable, and I think you probably would have done very well in that role. But we cited a potential conflict of interest in that we didn't want a store to dictate policy from within. And I think that possibly at the time, even at the very beginning, there was a little bit of a struggle to sort of see, where League would go in coalition with Three Kings Loot. And there were some growing pains, I think, at the time, without going too far into detail, about how involved Greg would get with controlling League and how much we would be an independent entity on our own.
Yeah. Well, I don't recall ever showing that much interest. At the very least, in a couple of recent times, I recall thinking that it wasn't like. So what you're saying might have actually happened, but it happened so far in the past that I don't actually remember it relative to just contributing in general to the various league crafting discussions. I remember always being pretty involved there, as were a bunch of people, and that continues still to this day. So
Yeah.
I definitely encourage anybody that's watching this to pop down into league crafting and share your good ideas, because the LC will definitely take those and workshop them, maybe bounce them around. It provides a lot of good perspective for the LC to be able to just have more ideas, have different perspectives, and that can sometimes turn into really great designs that the future episodes of this podcast will be covering. But at this time, we're still pretty vanilla, and I'm sure we're going to be getting into that, Chris.
Yeah.
But yeah,
to your point though, just
I
quickly,
think
you just keep
yeah.
put a little post-it on that second point. I want to address your first one. So I agree. Like you don't, I want to iterate on what Evan's saying. You don't need to be on the league committee to influence the future direction of the tournament series, certainly. And to this point, with the beginning of Modern Horizons 3, we're beginning to indicate who the league committee members are at the time of the printing of the rules, which is something we should have been doing all along. Like I would have liked to have seen who was contributing to any given rule set as I'm going through the history of leagues. So we're beginning to leave more of an institutional footprint as to who contributed, and that includes non-LC members on the server. If you contribute, a key mechanic or an idea that changes the way we do things, from this point on, our intention is to acknowledge that via inclusion in the rule set of the person's name who helped out. So, again, it's not a huge source of motivation, but the fact is that we're beginning to realize that we're leaving a sort of historical record, and that we ought to honor that and honor the contributions of, the many people who have debated the many rule sets that we've generated. So, yeah. And now I'll pass it back to Evan for the second part of his point. I just wanted to jump in on that.
Oh, I mean, first of all, yeah, that's pretty great, Chris, because I think, I mean, we're talking now, and this serves as a record of, what we've kind of crafted together as a community. Just, I think that's what this podcast, part of what it's going to be exploring throughout. There's going to be a lot of legends or mythological figures of our league that are either going to be coming back or have been here the entire time, and we're just going to hear from them more. But yeah, I mean, just to have that in the rule set, what people have been contributing, the LC and also non-LC, and yeah, LC league committee, just so that we're all on the same page lingo-wise for listeners, is very neat. So I appreciate that. For the second part of my point, yeah, I was just saying that I guess I don't actually recall. I think maybe that might have happened, but it's just been so overshadowed recently by me thinking, oh, it's just not quite the right time for me personally to really be interested in the LC. But I've always been supportive, and it's a tough job, especially with all these different league designs, and especially people can get very passionate about about this shared hobby that we have. And so I think it's been really good for you to get more support, because well, part of how it was back in the day is that you had people chiming in, but for a lot of the technical stuff, for a lot of all the PR, I think that was all you, Chris, right?
In the beginning, yeah.
Around this time period.
In the beginning,
Yeah.
yeah, and it became burdensome and overwhelming, and I was really appreciative of any help that people were willing and able to give, and I still am. Obviously, we wouldn't have gotten here if it weren't for a lot of people helping me out and making me look good by proxy. And the LC still, pulls the majority of the weight, and I think that if things are going well, I don't have to be that much of an active force as TO. Just kind of keep things on rails, keep the organizational support happening, and then sort of let people who have great ideas realize them via this kind of informal tournament design structure that we've created. Let it function as it's supposed to. Right? I've learned this through recently working with people in writing academic books cooperatively, like everybody has their own chapter. And one of my mentor, John Russell, he said to me, just let talented people do good things, and everything else just kind of falls in place. And I think that I learned from that approach. Everybody flourishes if we're not too precious about it, and we let every kind of different idea have its day in the sun. Then everybody gets their needs met, and everybody gets to sort of play the game they want to play it. That being said, right, tonight we had just by happenstance, you were one of the finalists in the Zombie League. Maybe we won't ever cover Zombie League in any other episode, so maybe now's a good time, if there ever was one, to talk about Zombie League. The first Zombie League was run by Caleb, and I remember at the time thinking, well, this is a lot more work. I mean, he was willing to do it, but it's a lot more work for the LC, and not for, I mean, it's just for the community, right? It's again, there's not usually many prizes associated with it, maybe a free entry or whatever, but there's not much in. The attrition rate's pretty high because there is not much in the prize pool. I played one match, didn't like my pool, and I dropped personally, so I can relate with that.
Yeah.
But the second time around, I'm like, okay, well, let's try it for OTJ. And Adam was the one who put that one together mostly of his own accord. And I wonder if, so this is a sort of general point. For those who don't know what we're talking about, zombie leagues are side quests. They're made to sort of fill the time in weeks 5 and 6, when a lot of people have been eliminated from the main tournament. It's something for them to do to kind of keep them entertained until the next main tournament offering starts. I guess the question, the sort of general design question I'd ask you, Evan, is do you think the LC has a legitimate role in designing side quests, or is that something that should be left to the community to organize for the community?
Hmm. Well, I think that especially if badges are going to be handed out, and if there's a free entry, which I assume, you as the TO kind of have to uh, work out how that works with, you know, the next league, unless it's just going to be, yeah. I think that there's
Adam's
some
volunteered
say,
to.
but it's definitely
Sorry, Adam, as the organizer, has volunteered to use his store credit to pay for the next entry for the person. So it really was his passion project.
right, right. So, um, I don't think it's necessary. Um, I think that they can. I guess what I'm saying is, like, if it's really burdensome to the LC, I can imagine it just saying, like, okay, we'd like to have this formal structure, but we'd like other people to put designs on it, um, or that they say, okay, well, for this particular one, I guess, like, not exactly hands free, but a loose rein, perhaps. Like you can chime, like the LC can chime in. They can also not. And like maybe it's something that they can get a committee adjunct or two to run if it's the infrastructure is just there and it's simple enough. Um,
Yeah.
because I do get the point, but I think people will definitely step up. I think that our history involves a lot of people stepping up, and um, you know, you, the LC, various members of the community for different ideas and stuff like that. And when I say the LC, I'm not really just talking about the current LC. I'm talking about
Yeah.
many people who have been in LC.
Sure.
Um, so I think that people will step up if other people aren't organizing it, because there have been discussions, and I do agree with them that I think it is a net good um, to have this sort of free model, so that there's activity and action when people want it, after they get eliminated, and just so people can kind of dip their toes in a little bit, so that people, and maybe there's some people who they can get a next entry, and that's kind of their gateway to being a long-term community member, which I think is what we're looking for.
Right.
At least I'm always happy to see new people join, and for our community to get a little bit larger, or to maintain size as people find different phases of their life, and maybe the league kind of recedes a bit, but is still always there for them if they ever wish to return. Kind of like how I did. I took a
Yeah.
break for
Let's
I
talk
don't
about
know, a
that.
year, 2 years, and then now I'm back.
you were very active, right, in the early days of League, and that's kind of, I mean, that's why you're an ideal person to speak to about Amonkhet Remastered, because you were there in the beginning for the first few leagues, and maybe for I think a year, maybe two at the beginning, and then you dipped out. You disappeared
Yeah.
for a while, and then you came back, and you're just as involved and invested as ever. So, I know that you stepped out for your own reasons, right, to sort of take a break from the game. I think,
Mhm.
but of course, the decision to come back is always a big one. We're happy to have you back, obviously, to be such a central uh, part or pillar of our community. What prompted you to return in full force to the Arena Gauntlet League?
Um, well, I think it's just a great way to play Magic. It's a great community. It was more just it was kind of hand in hand with Magic. Anytime I'm back to Magic, I'll be back to the AGL, and so there was just a time where I was thinking that Magic was kind of becoming more of a net drain on me. I was,
Right.
you know, disillusioned with myself, or I had burnout on it. I had some toxic expectations and a toxic relationship to the game. And after a bit of time, that's healed, and yeah, so I'm just approaching the game in a more healthy way. And so, you know, it's for me, it's just a matter of course that if I'm coming back to Magic, I'm coming back to the AGL because yeah, I just think it's great.
I think the right way to think about it. I mean, it can be at least. It doesn't have to be, but it can be a tool for personal growth. Right, being part of a community like this, I think, is a chance for us all to level up. And of course, that's not to say that everyone's going to get along all the time, but and we've had our famous server rows, that's for sure, and that's part of the history of the league. But in most cases, I think people are charitable enough that the loss of face is recoverable, and people are happy to sort of forget and forgive and move on, and even become fast friends. Right? You've seen people sort of like go at each other on the server and then end up sort of liking each other's comments again, or being on the same faction or the same team, or so there's that kind of story. I think it's not a part of the necessarily the structure of the tournament, but it's the structure of the meta tournament, so to speak, right? It's the structure of the community as it goes through these series of tournaments and keeps evolving and mutating as it goes through its paces with the gauntlet.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we're getting the different relationships, or our community is also being put through a gauntlet. But I mean,
Yeah.
I will say that I think that it's also maybe something like survivorship bias in a sense, like
Maybe.
the
Yeah.
people that really didn't jive, that really it blew up, and they're just not here anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think
yeah,
that's fair to say, right? There have been some famous flameouts, and that people haven't returned. And so I agree. It's a self-selecting, self-congratulatory success story for those who are still around, and that's of course that's the case, right? That's the case with any community, I suppose. Right? You have that kind of
yeah.
narrative. But let's get back to Amonkhet Remastered, since we have a limited amount of time, and I do want to touch on what makes this league unique, and hoping that you're going to
Mhm.
be able to bring some perspective to that. So this is our first, what you might call French vanilla or not quite vanilla league that we're going to discuss, because you notice at the end of the rule set there's this little section called League Challenges. And there are prizes from Three Kings Loot, little foil promo packs, that are handed out for people who achieve certain things that aren't necessarily related to winning the tournament, but are a bit like, I suppose, Xbox achievements, right? And the first person to get these would win a promo pack. So I'll just read them out, and you can tell me what you think of them after. So the first, we have the Trial of Zeal. There's a promo pack for the first player to complete 10 matches. So this rewards speedy play, right? Being the first one on the server on Friday night and just jamming all your matches before anybody else. There's the Trial of Strength, which is awarded for being the first person to win 5 consecutive 2-0 matches, right? So that's about strength, right? Being strong, not giving your opponents even a chance to win those matches. The Trial of Solidarity, to be the first player to play 15 different opponents. So that's about being social and meeting different people in the tournament. And at this point, I was saying we have 48 players, so it's very possible for you to do that in 3 weeks. The Trial of Wisdom, be the first player to open packs from 10 different sets. This sort of rewards flexibility, and it's basically inspired by the in-store Planeswalkers challenge that we used to have, which is that you needed to add a pack from all the different sets from Standard, or have a different pack for each loss. And finally, no, there's 2 more. The Trial of Ambition, be the first player to eliminate 3 other players. So that's for the killers in there, the people who want to enjoy the league by kind of ruining other people's fun. And that would happen later in the tournament. A lot of these would be handed out early in the tournament. We wanted a reward to be handed out late in the tournament. So Trial of Ambition sort of ticks that box. And finally, the God Pharaoh's Gift. And we're talking about community. This last one goes out to a good sports person, and this is decided by the DO. So that would have been decided by me. I forget exactly who won that one. And if it weren't for the fact that it would be a small, perverse incentive, it probably should have gone to 9th place, right? After the fact, I think it would be okay to award it to 9th place. If you say it at the beginning of the tournament, it might make people kind of aim for 9th, which isn't what we want. So. First of all, I guess I want your feedback on what you think of the challenges. What do they add to the Vanilla League experience? And what was your impression of these when you first played Amonkhet Remastered?
So I think, well, my impression from what I recall is that I don't think I really aimed for any of them.
Okay.
Maybe I'm misremembering, but I was, maybe there might have been a concern of like I couldn't, perhaps, because I was an employee of the store at the time and these were provided to the store.
Right.
But for the purposes of rewarding play. But in terms of what I think they are just like by themselves and not my own personal relationship to them or my personal impression of them. Yeah, I think they're good. The only one is 5 consecutive 2-0 matches seems like quite a lot, just at first blush. But I'm pretty sure somebody did achieve it at some point.
Somebody did, yeah. All these prizes were awarded. I just forget now to whom. That would require a bit more research on my part.
Yeah, one thing that I am thinking of is that, back in the day, you probably had to figure these ones out, and some of them were easier to track than others. I almost would be willing to bet that if we ever ran something similar-ish, that, some of this stuff could have been tracked automatically.
Yes.
In a sense.
Yes. The bots would do it now, or there'd be a spreadsheet, right, that would take care of it.
Exactly, and so... it shows
Steve.
kind of like how our progress. Mostly Steve, yeah.
Yeah, probably Steve would get stuck with it. Poor Steve. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you to Steve. Absolutely. Yeah, I like all the flavors of them. Trial of Wisdom. The funny thing about that is, lore-wise, the Trial of Wisdom is you're kind of beset on all sides by illusions and traps in a maze. And, one could say that this objective is being beset by illusions and traps, because that sounds like a way to not particularly succeed in any league, in my opinion. Trial of Solidarity, yeah, makes perfect sense. And then Trial of Ambition, definitely very flavorful to sacrifice your fellow players. But yeah, I think they all are really well in flavor. Good use of the extra promo packs that, as I said before, Three Kings Loot, we pretty much had no use for them other than to uh, be a reward for people that for our community. And in the time of COVID, we had no community except for the AGL, who we wanted to sponsor, and eventually lead up to becoming uh, the main sponsor, I
The
suppose,
partner
at a
store.
certain point.
Yeah,
The partner store, yeah.
yeah,
Um, so I think it was a good use of that, and also for the promo packs, we also at the time the league has grown tremendously across the world, but at the time we were much more heavily, I think, Montreal based, and so it was easy for people to come to the store, pick up the promo packs, and maybe purchase something, or even if not, I remember there have been a lot of times where uh, AGL members have purchased something, and I remember, oh, they're purchasing something now with the credit that they got from the league, and part of what we have still waiting for them is we have a list with their name on it that says, they have one foil promo pack and two promo packs from the leagues that they've been playing with us. I should put that into their order so that they can receive it. So yeah, I mean, it was there to drive um, some sales or some engagement with our store as well.
yeah. I think it was working pretty much hand in glove at that time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think, like, importantly, I think that the both for the store and for us as a league, the fact that we were designing challenges that would give out promo packs to non-top eighters shows that we're committed to a casual, friendly tournament experience. Like, it's not just for the spikes. We wanted to make sure that people who were just doing things for fun or who got like accidentally got some unique tournament state to work in their favor would also benefit. So that was, I think, the challenges show that we were at that time and still continue to be committed to rewarding the lower half or of the community, as well as the upper half in terms of results, not in terms of class or worth or any other thing, but just in terms of
Yeah.
stats. The stats don't lie, right? All right,
The numbers don't lie.
numbers don't lie. So the other thing I wanted to discuss was the Mega Draft final. So this is before we arrived at sort of like an ideal number for Mega Draft. So it says here in the rules, in the league finals, the top 8 players will retire their main tournament league decks and play a 3-round Mega Draft. Each player proceeding from the pre-finals 8th place and proceeding to pre-finals 1st place chooses a different arena available Magic set to be drafted in that order on mtgadraft.herokuapp.com, which has become Draftmancer, right? That's the old name for Draftmancer, which has also moved on to a new incarnation. Just like at that time, we were still officially the Arena Sealed League World Series, right? So our branding's moved on, and so has theirs.
The Olympics of Limited.
That's what we like. That's what we like to think. And I stand by that ideal as far as ideals go. We can try. Some people may think it's just a playground for weird ideas. That's true, but we are testing players in ways that nobody else does, I think. So we have some pretty well-rounded players, I think, as a result of all the different challenges that we give them. So this was the 8-pack, 8-player choice Mega Draft. What do you think of that format? A lot of people think 8 packs is too much for a Mega Draft, right? Some people think 6 is the magic number. There's a minority that think 5 is best. 4 is like a dino-sized draft, right? Wizards has already done that. So we normally it's 5 to 8. That's the sort of the widest. That's the highest that we'd like to go is 8 packs. But having played obviously in an 8-pack Mega Draft, what was your feeling about that event?
I mean, yeah, I was reviewing the rules for small differences or things that we would probably be talking about that, and that immediately caught my eye as, man, that was different. I have no recollection other than the fact that was I playing? I don't even really remember the deck I was playing. I think it might have been blue red. I know I didn't win the Mega Draft. I just won the league because I was far ahead enough that I managed to scrape by on points, much as what happened between you and me, Chris, during a Korea League.
Yeah, Evan's Revenge,
Um,
we call this one.
yes, yes, Evan's Revenge. Yes, I was blue red looking at it. Now I lost to Maxine in the finals, black red. I don't actually recall the draft itself, but I'm willing to bet I was thinking, man, this is going on for a long time. Looking at the list, it's decently powerful for the time period. But yeah, I think it's just too much probably. Um, uh, these days, I guess depending on the mix of sets, maybe five is good enough. If we want to go for a lower powered uh, kind of final selection of draft decks, then five would be good. And maybe it might not even be that much less powerful, especially for the upcoming OTJ Mega Draft. Those are some of the most powerful sets that we have available to us, barring LTR and I think just LTR. So in cases like that going forward, it's quite possible that five approaches the power level that people would get out of six packs, but eight is kind of just far too much. Decks will be more powerful, but at a certain point from when you're playing in it, you're just kind of in your colors. You make very small upgrades. You pick up a spell land. You hate draft, but the large bulk of the interesting decision making, even in I think packs 5 to 6 sometimes, is kind of behind you. And when you extend that to packs 7 and 8, that's quite a lot of time and quite a lot of time for people to be commentating or watching as well. Um, so I'm glad that this is one of the very few times that we've ever done an 8 pack mega draft, and I
Mm.
think for good reason that people haven't continued.
Any sort of tournament specific reminiscing that you'd like to do? Any gloating? Any good beat stories that you'd like to share?
So, this is because of the Magic hiatus, maybe, and also just in general. I don't have a super strong long-term memory. So there's a lot of the events that I don't really recollect. But one thing that I noticed, um, in terms of reviewing the different rules, so M21, the previous one, and then AKR, is that previously there was a rule that said uh, we could only have no more than four of a copy. So kind of like constructed rules,
Yes.
right? You could have no more than a playset. And then I remember that we talked about this in league crafting, and then I also, talked about it to you separately. And eventually, you said, "Okay, well, something like Evan, I can see you're passionate about this, so we'll kind of bring it to the people." Um, and then we did, and then eventually that changed, and that change is reflected here in this rule set. And I mean, I don't. It didn't matter a huge amount for this league because Zeke only played seven, or no, he only played five out of his seven cows or something like that. But yeah, he was still able to play more than the max amount that would normally be allowed under limited rules. Sorry, normally allowed under constructed rules, in a way that's consistent with limited. Because in limited, for example, if you go to your pre-release and you do open up five, I don't know, trained airings, for example, you'll be able to play all of those five trained airings. So I remember that as being, I don't know, just something that I guess I could say I'm proud of, and that ended up, yeah, just being a good change, one of many that have been made over the course of all
For
this time.
for what it's
But
worth,
I did see
for what
your
it's
points
worth,
at the
Evan,
time.
I still think you're wrong. I'll tell you why. I'll tell
Yeah, yeah,
so I'll tell you
yeah,
why. So
yeah.
I do think that so just like our limited is a sort of competitive casual is the way I describe it, right? The people are trying to
Mm-hmm.
win. They still are very passionate about winning, but the community is very casual. I also think about our format as limited constructed essentially. So
Mm-hmm.
we are sort of the longer that we play a league and the more packs we add, the more we move away from limited and towards constructed. And part of the hallmark of a constructed deck is a 4 of rule to stop it from being abusive when you stack on extra copies of a card that weren't ever meant to be played in unlimited multiples. Now, a couple of times this has been exploited, right? So there was Johnny in, I forget which league, possibly it was the next league even, which was the Kaladesh Remastered. And he kept, remember the 4/4 construct that looks for a 4/4 construct, that looks for a 4/4 construct, that looks for a 4/4 construct? He chained, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 of those together, and he consistently battered everybody, and only because you changed this rule. And so I thought, like, okay, this is an example of why the 4 of rule is important. And Zach's army of amazing flying cows maybe is another example of why a 4 of rule is not such a bad idea. I mean, I know that I'm in the minority here, but I think that we don't want to, like, it's not just sealed, right? It's you're working with a 60-card deck, and if you keep adding packs to it, you add up to 10 packs for a total of 16. It's looking pretty powerful, and I feel like the extra commons and uncommons that you can kind of get in there do sometimes make a difference between winning and losing. Plus, this is the other thing. If you can add more than 4 copies of a card, you have an additional reason to just add punishment packs of the same set, which I think leads to repetitive and boring gameplay. So it was always in there as a kind of prod to get people to add offset packs to their pools. And that's missing now. So I still think, for various reasons, that you should not be applauded for that, but rather booed rather than yayed, because I think it is. I'm not willing to sort of die on this hill or fight this fight over again, but I still think it's a design mistake to abandon the 4 of rule.
Yeah, I have Johnny's deck pulled up. Yes, the self-assembler.
Yes.
5 copies. It was great. He ended up first place with that. Yeah, I mean,
you could say, well, how many times did he actually play the 5th copy? It turns out quite a bit. If memory serves, he would play every single copy he could. The 5th copy would be.
I mean, with that card, it's just logical, right?
Yeah. I remember that
either the opponent's dying or something's gone terribly wrong if he's not playing all 5 copies.
Yeah. It was oppressive to play against back then. I remember.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were feeling that way as well when you went Garuda and then you pulled it, and then like another Garuda came out, and then they got so many of their things popping out from the Garuda triggers.
Yeah, I mean, opening good cards is always going to make the experience miserable for the opponents, and that's the case.
Yeah,
I mean, I just remember being able to beat number 4 of Johnny's self-assembler team, and then the 5th comes out, and I'm like,
yeah,
really, like. It's not reasonable.
Yeah,
it's not reasonable past that point.
We're not going to rehash the whole thing, but I will just say, especially because people have been so focused, going back to OTJ in our current league, people have really been focusing on the rares, the bombs, those sorts of cards, right?
Yeah.
So, there's going to be a certain unfairness as well, and I think that was part of the argument. Just if things are going to be so unfair that, Evan gets to open up Liliana, Death's Majesty, and Archfiend of Ifnir, and Liliana's Mastery, and all these other crazy rares and stuff like that, that it's like, okay, well, shouldn't poor Johnny over here, who only got 5 self-assemblers, of course he had much more of that, and then, Zeke had much more in his deck, and, they have those stuff, but it's like a strength that it's hard to, it's I don't know, that, that's what they opened. We wouldn't. It'd be much less likely to happen in a pre-release sealed, but we wouldn't do that to somebody in a pre-release sealed.
No, of course not.
Yeah, we'll have our disagreements, and
the thing is, you'll only ever open up 6 packs in a pre-release sealed, so it's not abusable ad infinitum, right? It's and plus sealed pools are only meant to be used for 1 afternoon, and then they're disassembled. So the the tendency for something to be oppressive for a very long time is mitigated by the fact you're playing sealed for 3 rounds and then you chuck the cards back into your collection forever. Whereas if the pattern persists over 6 weeks, it can get a little bit cloying for the people fighting against those multiples. Anyway, we won't spend much more time on this, but I think Johnny, since he's in the mix now, he asked you a very interesting question that I want to give you a chance to address. He said, "Look, given that Amonkhet Remastered was mostly a vanilla league, if you had to redesign it now, let's say as a hypothetical LC member, what would you do differently? How would you design Amonkhet Remastered from the top down, using sort of modern league design principles?"
Yeah, so I mean, I can't really speak to modern league design principles that much, because I mean, I do see what's going on, uh, but there's a bunch of discussion and different factors being balanced that I just I'm not privy to, so I wouldn't be able to claim that I can come at it from that much certainty. But I can at least talk about what I like. Everybody's got their own tastes and perspectives,
Yeah.
and so for me, I like tinkering a lot with decks. I like different kind of wonky rules and restrictions, and I like storytelling aspects. And so I spent some time thinking about the question, and it's kind of a mix of all that. I looked a bit into the Amonkhet lore. I didn't really follow, I guess, if there was any stories that had been put out at the time, or I wasn't around when Amonkhet was first released, but I saw that we had our trials that were discussed, that we've discussed pretty heavily on this episode, and that were the basis of the promo packs. So I was thinking that, I while reading on the wiki for all lore, I was like, well, these people lived a pretty crazy life. They're a bunch of really hardened warriors, and then their reward at the end of all the trials is to die, and then to become, an Eternal for the God Emperor. Turns out to be Nicol Bolas.
Right.
And so I was thinking, like, well, we could kind of represent that life within the span of the AGL players' experience in this league, for this updated version, or the Evan version of Amonkhet Remastered. So yeah, I just wanted to represent the life of an Amonkhet warrior through the player's league experience, and what does every person experience in league, more or less, except if you're some of the lucky few, like Thomas, this league. You experience that you've had your 10 losses over the course of your league. And so
you die.
Instead of having... Go ahead, York.
I said you die.
You die.
Yeah.
Yeah. But here, in this version, everyone would die gloriously eternal. So instead of... and I guess you haven't really covered these, but a lot of people that are listening to this probably will have been played in LTR or Plane Chase, so those had weekly stipulations, or even just in the most recent one. Let's talk about OTJ. We had our duels, right? So there would be potentially different events or different stipulations that are triggered upon every loss that somebody takes when they get their punishment pack. And in this case, it would be a moment of growth in their life. And so here are some examples. And I don't really claim that any of this would be balanced. I'm sure if this idea, if suddenly somebody said, like, hey, Evan, you actually are designing this, I'm sure there'd be a bunch of really good input from the LC in terms of, like, this won't work, this should be rebalanced that way. But, some general ideas were, when you have 0 losses, you'll start off with a 50-card deck. So that people, they've got a smaller deck, they're a child, right? And provides a slightly different flavor. Things are able to be a little bit more streamlined and synergistic. People seem to quite like that in LTR the first week, right? When we were in the Shire.
Yeah.
I think it was 40 cards at that point, right, Chris?
Yes. And then it grew, right?
Yes.
I believe.
Yes, and then it grows. And so similarly, after your first loss, you get an ATR punishment pack with an option of reroll. But the reason why we're giving you the option of reroll to make this slightly more powerful than normal is because at this point you're growing, so we're going to add 5 to your minimum deck size. So it would be a 55 card deck. And then on the next one, you get your Amonkhet Remastered punishment pack, you get a common desert of your choice, you get a random artifact, and the theme of that is that you're constructing the obelisk. Apparently, before they begin their trials, each pre-initiate, the acolytes that are trying to become initiates to eventually serve the God Pharaoh, they construct an obelisk together, and that's an obelisk that they then later protect during the Trial of Solidarity. So you'd get a random artifact in the common desert of your choice, showing that you're constructing the obelisk in that place, and you'd add another 5 to your deck, 5 minimum deck size. So at this point, you're at 60 minimum cards, and you're back to the normal. And so we kind of have to make these a little bit better than normal, because obviously it's not just that you're like adding to your deck size means your deck is relatively weaker. So we can't just give you the punishment pack, or we could, but I think it would be a little unfair to just give you the punishment pack. So it has to be a little bit juiced for these first couple ones. The third loss would be a ceremony of measurement, and in this case, your true heart is being revealed, and so and some people become viziers, focusing solely on one of the gods. Others are revealed to be true warriors, and so they can go on to the 5 trials. And so to represent that, the first 2 packs were only Amonkhet Remastered, but at this point you can have a punishment pack of your choice, which would be kind of a curated list, because at the time of the original Amonkhet, it was everything on Arena, right, Chris? Because
Yes, because
yeah.
it was a limited set of what was on Arena. It was pretty. there weren't a lot of options.
Oh yeah, I actually counted earlier. There was 13, and so the funny thing is we were asked to choose 8 out of 13. So we had more sets in the Mega Draft than there were sets excluded that were actually on Arena.
That's right. Yeah.
But anyways, at this point, it would be a specific list. Things that actually synergize and are flavorful. Nothing that's too much more powerful. At the time, we were okay with it being everything on Arena, because Amonkhet Remastered, I think, was the most powerful. Maybe War was debatable. Some people, I think, in top 8 went for some War. I didn't personally, because I was pretty heavy on the black-red cycling deck.
I
But
think Ikoria
just nothing that's too.
Ikoria still stands up. I think over the years as a pretty strong set.
Yeah. So War, Ikoria, AKR, but nothing that all those kind of could go toe to toe, especially with AKR being the initial 6 packs. But now, if you tried to throw OTJ in there, people would just never pick Amonkhet Remastered ever. So the ceremony of measurement opens up the choice now, and then that'll continue on as you're now a full adult. You can make your own choices, and you get a map token as well. The 4th to 8th loss, we're not going to go over each of them, but they would be the 5 different trials. Trial of solidarity, followed by strength, followed by wisdom, followed by ambition, followed by zeal. And so for those ones, each of them, they would receive a cartouche, because in that time they would be completing the trials, and every trial that is completed, you earn the cartouche, and you get the 5 cartouches to become an Eternal. And then each of them would have a different flavorful aspect. So on the 4th loss, for example, which would be when you completed the Trial of Solidarity, at the beginning of the league, you'd be assigned to a crop, and a crop is just a group of your fellow warriors. So during this time, and in this case, this crop, your fellow warriors, is actually just maybe 10 to 11 different players that you're just randomly assigned to. During that time, during the Trial of Solidarity, since you're all helping each other out, anytime somebody hits their 4th loss, they can ask any of their crop mates for any deck building advice, any perspectives that they can give, and people are they can go further. I'm sure that in Amonkhet, some of the people that went through their trial of solidarity, they ended up fast friends and then could and then helped each other voluntarily. But in this case, you have to help each other while you're facing your trial of solidarity. Um, and then the flip side of that is the trial of ambition, which in the lore you have to sacrifice one of your prop mates in order to succeed the trial of ambition in the best way. Once you hit your seventh loss, because that would be the fourth trial, the next match that you play must be against one of your fellow prop mates that you were assigned to at the beginning. Finally, to round it out, the ninth loss would return to just being an AKR punishment pack, as you are, connected eternally to Amonkhet. And then you also are kind of solidifying or cementing. There's no more growth, right? You are a zombie, forever unchanging in service to the God Pharaoh until eventually you attack Ravnica. So this would actually be a reduction in deck size of -10. So you'd have a 50 minimum deck size. So you're able to concentrate a little bit more and be more powerful. And this might be way too strong, is your 10th loss, you would reduce that by a further 10. So you're actually back to regular limited deck sizes. So 40 card decks. And because I think that that's quite strong, during the 10th loss, because of this Undying Service, there's actually no punishment. At this point, there's no changing, except for just, the essential strength that you have. And so while all these are a lot of different changes, some other thoughts that are about this is that, some people don't like the weekly restrictions because of the constant deck build, or like the re-deck building. So like if you didn't lose as your last match, well, here you have to deck build again.
Yeah.
But if we tie it to each loss, then these changes that you make, you were going to be deck building anyways at that time, right? So it kind of matches with what's going on. And for all the confusing things like, oh, I don't remember who my crop mates are. Oh, 55 cards, that's not really intuitive. How will I remember that? My imagination would be that the Rutstein bot that we're currently using for OTJ would come back as a Harsh Mentor, which is a rare that I think, like, when people use abilities, they take some damage.
Yeah.
But anyways, this Harsh Mentor, with some great flavor by Adam, I assume, would just be like telling them, hey, this is what you got to do, young whelp. Like, you're no longer a 50-card deck. 55 is your minimum.
Yeah.
And make sure that none of the other prop mates are going above or below. Like, make sure that you know what their deck size is.
Yeah.
And we would have that in the spreadsheets or something. So,
yeah.
Anyways, that's my entire idea.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it's like there for flavor, and then it's there for kind of complexity, but mostly kind of like for the storytelling aspect of this journey that you're going through.
In terms of feedback, yes, it's very flavorful. It's deeply flavorful. I like how it's tied to the lore. I like how each loss of the represents a different stage of your life. I think that's something we haven't done before with League mechanics, so it's very original. I think it could have legs for some future League, and as you point out, the bots and the software offload a lot of the complexity that would have, I think, in the olden days, would have represented a lot of opposition to the idea, because they would have said, well, it's too fiddly or it's too complicated, right? Like, for example, I told you about the idea of mine that got nixed and voted down because it was too complicated at the time, was just grow your deck size by 10 cards per week. So start it with 40, and then go all the way up to, I guess 140, right? So, the ever-growing deck list, as you add a punishment pack, you keep adding 10 slots to your deck. People thought that was too much rebuilding and redrafting. That might be a similar objection to your idea, but I think most of the other things can be dealt with by, as you point out, flavor and bots. So thanks for sharing your alternate vision. It sounds like certainly something that, it's a different look at Amonkhet. If we ever remastered Amonkhet, we might do something similar. Are we going back to Amonkhet anytime soon? I don't know. I haven't really thought about this coming year's offerings that much. There's so much going on in the present. I know we're going back to what is it? There's a surprising
Uh,
plane we're going back to.
so in the short term, we're going back to we're not going back. We're going to Boomboro and then Duskborn, right? Fairy tale animals and then horror, and then we're doing Death Race, right? Which is kind of just a mad race across three planes.
Yeah,
We're going to be returning to Tarkir,
yeah, that's the one.
and we're going to be returning to Arcadios, which is the plane of Strixhaven,
Right.
as they're rebuilding it. So,
So no,
yeah,
unfortunately,
and
no Amonkhet Remastered returns coming in the near future. But it's something to keep in mind. I mean, if we ever find a place where representing stages of life with punishment packs becomes flavorfully relevant, then I think it's worth looking at your proposal. But I think that's all the time we have.
yeah, and I
We're
guess
up at the hour-long mark, Evan. So we might have to
yeah,
ask you if
I
there's any
guess
last thoughts or comments.
yeah, is that I really liked the LCI paths design, and so this does take heavy inspiration from that, except everybody's kind of on the same path. Um, and yeah, just that I think that there might be interesting space for different restrictions to occur on loss potentially, as opposed to on week, would be the major takeaway um, for this idea.
Yeah.
Everything else can be adapted to whatever is needed. But yeah, just heavily inspired by the plane chase LTR designs and LCI designs. And yeah, shout out to the LC and shout out to Ryan, who I think specifically spearheaded a lot of that path design for LCI.
Yeah, the only thing again that I can think about that might be problematic would be like people at different steps along their path fighting each other. Like if I've got a 60 card deck and I'm fighting you with a 40 card deck, whoo boy! Right, so the gap between different players playing each other in the same week but at different stages along their life journey towards loss, right, would be
Right.
some of these matchups would have to be pretty carefully balanced. You have to sort of calculate how far people could actually be away from each other at any given time, and figure out whether there's going to be some sort of unbalanced play that results in one stage of life unfairly
That is a good point.
predating on another.
And I think this is also inspired by some people. There has been some discourse on like people feeling like catch-up mechanics are either not keeping pace or that they've been weakened. So this would is I actually did have it kind of be deliberately strengthened as a counterbalance to that, or just as an idea to like just for this hypothetical that it's like okay, well maybe we'll have a bit of a tighter race at the end. If the catch up, because it is quite significantly different, as you said, 60 card versus 40 card, but it is like the last stand, perhaps, of these Eternals. But it would be something definitely that would need a lot of careful thought into it, and this was kind of just something thought up on a random evening as Johnny's question came in.
Yeah, of course, and appreciate your time in answering the question, and appreciate Johnny's question and sort of inspiring it. So this kind of in leagues where we don't have a lot to talk about in terms of the past mechanics, I do think it's an interesting question. Like, how should we have done it, or how would you do it now, with the knowledge you have looking back at it? So keep on. I hope that you keep on contributing ideas to the league, and I appreciate what you've whipped up in answer to Johnny's question. So thanks for your time, Evan. We're going to wrap up this episode of Leagues Behind. Next time, we are going to, I don't know, should we go back to OTJ or is it too soon? Should we give it a little break? Otherwise, we're going to Zendikar Rising. I feel like maybe we should let leagues lie for a bit before we return to them. So we'll probably go to Zendikar Rising next before we look at anything else.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I like what you're doing chronologically. You'll get to OTJ and I don't know. You're doing this about once every 1 to 2 weeks.
Yep.
Maybe next year you'll get to OTJ, and at that point you'll also be doing Leagues Ahead for I don't know the Final Fantasy league that we'll be doing? Because I'm sure that's coming to Arena.
I think yeah, we gotta let the dust settle a little bit before we can sort of look at things neutrally, and see them for what they
For
are.
sure.
So next time it'll be Zendikar Rising, which would be again a big jump from where we were. So we almost double the player base, right? We go from 48 players to 91 there. So that's going to be a whole different episode, a whole different set of issues and topics and mechanics. So once again, thanks Evan for joining me and discussing Amonkhet Remastered. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks, Orc. Yeah, have a good night. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for organizing the tournament.
Thanks, man.
Have a good one.
See you next time.